One day I found Tess Holliday, and Tess Holliday looked amazing to me.
People like her are really changing society, and I want to be like her.
The way she loves herself and her body and doesn't care what anyone says about it. She inspires me, she motivates me.
She had like all this makeup done and her hair was pretty, and you know, like she looked so glamorous. I wanted to be like Tess Holliday.
The Health at Every Size movement, or HAES, has been around for a long time, but has exploded in popularity over the last few years, with more and more social media posts such as these every day. It's not the fat that kills us, it's the fat hatred. Health status is not defined by weight, so weight loss programs are about aesthetics. Your weight is not the problem, food is not the problem, diet culture is the problem. I don't have an eating problem, I have a fat phobia problem. Or my personal favorite, BMI is government propaganda. At the most extreme end, Health at Every Size supporters and fat activists argue that obesity is not dangerous and that bodies naturally come in all shapes and sizes, all the way up to 600 pounds, or what would be called infini-fat according to them. Some even call the obesity epidemic a myth. They say it doesn't kill people or cause disease.
We hear in the news all the time about an obesity epidemic and how people are dying of obesity. And what we see is that it's just not true.
According to them, the diseases we often attribute to obesity, such as diabetes and hypertension, are the result of weight stigma, the psychological pressure of living in a society that mistreats fat people, and not due to the excess weight itself. Many HAES supporters go as far as to say that the war on obesity is a form of eugenics. And gastric bypass is, quote, voluntary amputation. And they're campaigning to have the word stricken from the medical literature and classified as hate speech. At this point, you might be saying to yourself, how is it possible that something so preposterous has become almost mainstream? And surprisingly, the answer seems to be Tess Holliday. Today we'll be discussing Tess Holliday, the biggest and most dangerous lie of Health at Every Size, namely that morbid obesity can be considered healthy, and the research or lack thereof that's used to support these claims. I hope you guys enjoyed my double intro. This video actually started off as a way more casual video, but the more I read and the more I saw, the more I was like, nope, I'm gonna drop everything and make this gigantic video about Tess Holliday and Health at Every Size. I've labeled everything with timestamps, so if you want to hop around or rewatch stuff, it should be pretty easy to do so. We're gonna get into a lot of stuff today, but before we do, I should say a few disclaimers up front. Throughout this video, I'm going to be using the terms fat activist, Health at Every Size supporter, and body positivity person to mean the same thing. There is a distinction between these groups, and they're not all, harmful. But that line is very blurry online, so I'm going to be using them interchangeably during the video. I also want to say that there are definitely people practicing Health at Every Size a lot more reasonably than the depiction you're about to see here. I went into this video thinking that HAES was going to be a lot more reasonable than I've seen it portrayed by the extremists online. But I actually ended up leaving it thinking that it was even more harmful than I thought. And you guys are going to see why today. All right, let's get started. Tess Holliday made waves in 2015 as the first size 22 model to be signed to a major agency.
It's something I wanted to do my whole life, right? And everyone always told me I would never be able to do it. Right. They laughed at me, they made fun of me. Right. And I don't know if it was like delusion, but I just was like, I'm gonna try.
Since then, she's been called the world's biggest supermodel, worked with big brands like H&M and Benefit Cosmetics, and named one of the most influential people on the internet by Time magazine. And by 2018, she had already landed the now infamous cover of Cosmo UK.
Did you see the cover of Cosmopolitan magazine that was widely criticized because they had a morbidly obese woman on?
Many people say they love the body positive move made by Cosmo UK. Others say Tess Holliday is an unhealthy representation.
You are celebrating morbid obesity.
I am not celebrating
That's what you're
morbid
doing.
obesity. This cover, this is one cover which has a larger lady on the cover in a sea, in a world, in a culture which has venerated, since I can remember, thinness.
Seeing someone like me on the cover of like a glossy magazine shouldn't be top news.
They're hailing her as brave. I mean, what's brave about, you know, eating ice cream?
She's literally morbidly obese. She's fucking dying. She's addicted to food in a horrible way. And to promote that and pretend that somehow or another this is okay.
Clearly, there were some mixed reactions. Some people saw Tess's cover as a special moment for body positivity, while others went as far as to say it was glorifying obesity. The term glorifying obesity is thrown around a lot these days, and not always appropriately. When 1/3 of Ashley Graham was featured on the cover of Vogue, glorifying obesity. When Nike rolled out a plus-size mannequin so fat people could exercise, glorifying obesity. When Mattel offered up a curvy Barbie, size 8, US medium, glorifying obesity. Every plus-size girl dancing around on TikTok, glorifying obesity. As you can see, there is quite the range here. And there is a distinction between being fat and living your life and pretending that obesity is no big deal. Except that in Tess' case, it kind of actually was glorifying obesity for real this time. At 5'5" and over 300 pounds, Tess Holliday is by far the biggest model to have ever graced the cover of a major magazine. I've thought about this a lot, and I don't know that it's fair to say that Tess's cover is problematic in of itself. After all, having a particularly admirable or healthy lifestyle hasn't exactly ever been a prerequisite to be a model or celebrity. And in many ways, if you think about it, unhealthy lifestyles have been glamorized forever at this point. Now, is that a good thing? No, none of this is good. But I think to be disproportionately offended because an obese woman is on the cover of a magazine is, I think, unfair. And actually, Tess had already been on the cover of People magazine in 2015, which by readership is 5 times larger than Cosmo UK, without nearly the same level of controversy. The difference in outrage seems to stem from the fact that Cosmo felt the need to devote an entire page to declaring that Tess was strong, fit, and 300 pounds. And most of the discussion revolved around her excellent health and workout regime, as opposed to her fight for body positivity and self-love.
I know we've been putting this off for a little bit, and now it's time to talk.
My goals are just to feel better and be stronger, and also show people that fat girls work out.
Showing people that fat girls work out is a big thing for Tess. She chose a famous personal trainer. They both made announcements about it on their Instagram accounts. They shot multiple videos while they were together, and they even shot that People TV segment in just the few short months that they were working together. Now, Tess has a running sponsorship with Fabletics, and since that time, I haven't seen any videos of her working out. So I guess the photo shoots in athletic clothes are meeting her quota for showing people that fat girls work out, because she has totally stopped with that. All in all, it just feels very contrived to me. I feel like it's one thing for Tess Holliday to be on the cover of a magazine for any reason, because she validates plus-size women, because she's popular, because you want to be controversial to sell more magazines. Whatever. But something completely different when Cosmo takes a stand to validate Tess's delusion that she's healthy to millions of people, and then goes as far as to shove it down our throats with 3 pages about her workout regime, as opposed to making the article literally about anything else. The problem with this is, Cosmo just put mainstream media's stamp of approval on one of the most heinous lies of health at every size. The preposterous untruth that morbid obesity can be considered healthy.
What about your own health test? Do you ever, because we had a report very recently in this country saying it's a myth that you can be very overweight, obese, and be healthy. So do you worry about your weight? You've got young children. Do you worry about your health?
Look, I would not go through having kids and what it does to your body to not be around for them. You know what I mean? I know that I'm healthy.
Being a healthy, extremely obese person is an oxymoron, point blank. And it is extremely dangerous to suggest otherwise on talk shows and the front of magazines. So this was a caption from one of Tess's Instagram posts, which has since been removed but was cataloged on a website. To say and actually believe things like, if you're fat, you're automatically unhealthy, is wildly inaccurate. You can absolutely be overweight and be healthy. I know, because I am not, in fact, over 7 feet tall to balance out my weight. So according to my BMI, I'm obese, which is hilarious to me. Not because I think being unhealthy is funny, but because I'm healthy. Extremely so, in fact. I'm able to keep up with my children perfectly. So Tess is saying a lot in that statement. First off, most notable being that she's not obese. You don't really just get to opt out of being obese. Unless, you know, there's an issue with BMI and you're not meant to be in that category, which would not apply to this level of obesity. Or you go and have your fat scanned and you find out that you're actually carrying 200 pounds of muscle. Being able to do essential life tasks, such as watching after your children or stand on your feet all day to do your job, does not prove that you are extremely healthy. Now, there's enough data to suggest that you can indeed be overweight and be healthy. But to be fair, there is also data suggesting that no, people are healthiest within the normal BMI range, and beyond that, you're less healthy. You can make a compelling argument with the data that's out there for either one. But that is not what we're talking about here. There are no doctors that I've seen arguing that you can be this obese and be healthy. This is the equivalent of someone who's like a high-functioning alcoholic or a chain smoker saying that because they don't have any issues right now, because they don't have a disease right now, that they're healthy. Well, no, you have an addiction. And by Cosmo validating this by acting like, oh, you know, Tess, she lives a healthy lifestyle, she's just big. It plays into the health at every size narrative that you can be this big and it's not suggestive of you living an unhealthy lifestyle or having a problem with food. You know, you're just born that way, you're just built like that. And unfortunately, Cosmo is not the only one validating Tess's delusions to millions of people. There seems to be this budding corporate trend of discussing health as if it just involves declaring, I am healthy, as opposed to being defined by actively living a healthy lifestyle and not engaging in destructive behavior. Prior to this cover, Tess was actually featured on the front of Self, an actual health magazine. Or at least it was a health magazine. I don't know what you would call it today. And Health magazine has featured many fat activists as of late, including Virgie Tovar, which if you've seen my video on her, you'll know her definition of health is a little out there. Actually, Virgie recently also said, there is no such thing as individual health. So there you have it. In the land of body positivity, health is so subjective that it basically doesn't even exist. And the corporate world is so desperate to cash in on people's insecurities that they're willing to put feelings over facts and people's health at risk in order to pander. In my opinion though, one of the most empowering discoveries over the last however many years is just how big of an impact our decisions, our actions can have on our, what's called our health span, which is essentially the amount of years we live in our lives in good health, free from the chronic diseases that come with aging. And is that not extremely encouraging to the general public? Why would we ever downplay that to any degree at all? This is, as far as I can tell, the definition of glorifying obesity, obscuring the truest reality of the disease of obesity and pretending that it is somehow not a big deal. And although this hypothesis is still unsupported by current research, moments like these are huge for movements like Health at Every Size. And why many of Tess's obese followers believe that Tess is healthy, and therefore they're healthy too. It's also why people suddenly feel confident saying things like this.
Can this person go back to school, please? Or go do some research and not be a fucking idiot? Fat does not equal unhealthy. Get your info straight before you hop on the internet and be an idiot.
Now, fat might not equal unhealthy, but being very obese certainly does. So before we discuss the science that fat activists use to support their claims, let's talk a little bit about the cold, hard, and unglamorous reality of obesity. The inconvenient truth in this instance is that at 5'3" and over 300 pounds, Tess Holliday has a BMI of at least 49 and would be considered to have the most extreme form of obesity. Class 3, formerly known as morbidly obese. At this size, Tess is at risk for over 200 different diseases. And much to the chagrin of the politically correct, obesity itself is classified as a disease because it is not only an underpinning of major chronic diseases, but a serious, debilitating condition in its own right. So how is obesity a debilitating condition in its own right? Two of the biggest reasons for this are 1, dangerous visceral fat, and 2, mechanical issues stemming from extra weight. Also, you guys totally lucked out because I was planning on showing you these like really gross anatomy videos of visceral fat, but I found out it's against the community guidelines. So if you want to see them, you can look them up. They're on YouTube. They're super gross though, so be warned. Visceral fat is commonly referred to as belly fat, but specifically refers to the fat wrapped around your internal organs. We all have and need visceral fat, but too much visceral fat leaks excess hormones and inflammatory molecules into your bloodstream, putting your body into a chronic inflammatory state, which results in DNA damage and majorly ups your risk for a ton of different diseases and cancers. Mechanical issues. The most obvious and observable reason that obesity is horrendous for your body is simple. All that extra body weight is heavy. Our bodies were not designed to carry an excess 100, 200, 300 pounds. And lugging this weight around has serious and unavoidable consequences. Extra weight wears down the cartilage in the knees and joints prematurely. The damage increases exponentially as weight is gained because your joints not only have to deal with the extra pressure, but the increase of force during movement. According to Harvard Medical School, when you walk across level ground, the force on your knees is the equivalent of 1.5 times your body weight. That means Tess, at 300 plus pounds, is putting 450 pounds of pressure on her knees with each step, while someone at 150 pounds is only putting about 225 pounds of pressure per step. This is why it's very dangerous for very obese people to exercise.
At some point in time, if she keeps up this type of training, Tess Holliday will most likely suffer an injury to her ankle, her lower back, or her knees.
As you continue to go up in weight, that pressure just continues to compound. Every minute you spend at that size, you're needlessly harming your body. This alone for me is enough to declare health at every size a myth. I could go on forever about the consequences of obesity, but there are decades of research and proof to support this already. It is very obvious that your weight may indeed disqualify you from the healthy category. Anyway, now that we've gone over that, let's get back to Tess and how she became the gateway drug to health at every size. Many plus-size women have felt held back or defined by society's often unfair depictions of bigger women.
Billy? Billy? Billy! Daddy!
So while it may seem that Tess Holliday is famous in spite of her weight, in reality she's become so successful because of her weight. As far as famous plus-size models go, Ashley Graham came before her, but Ashley Graham still looks exactly like a typical model. With the classic 0.7 waist-to-hip ratio, a big butt and boobs, and no visible lumps with smooth, shiny, tight skin. Basically, her body still looks like a typical model's body. Even with Cosmo's best efforts, however, Tess's body doesn't. Tess is lumpy. Tess has a lot of cellulite. She has back fat, underarm flaps, and ample body rolls. Tess, in some ways then, is more like the average plus-size woman than any other cover model to come before her.
It's just amazing to have a role model like Tess and actually see someone who actually looks like me, owning their sexiness and owning their curves and being someone that I can actually relate to in the mainstream media.
And this common ground makes her incredibly influential.
Why hate yourself and why deprive yourself of having the most beautiful life possible because you happen to be fat or you happen to be a different color or you happen to be whatever's holding you back. Like, life's too fucking short for that shit.
These women see Tess being celebrated for her beauty and think, I can be beautiful too. the F Your Beauty Standards hashtag she started has grown to over 4.5 million reposts of women declaring that they find themselves beautiful, regardless of what you or society thinks. And they're looking to Tess for inspiration and as a role model, even going as far as to idolize her in some instances.
When I was in high school and I got an Instagram, one of the very first people I followed was the great Tess Holliday.
People like Tess Holliday give me and so many other women confidence.
I had never seen someone who looked like me at the time, who had the same kind of body as me, rocking it. Honestly, like I had not seen that before.
And she showed me how to love my body. She showed me how to love every curve, every lump, every bump, and you know, just to be happy in the body that I'm in.
Yeah, she is like an icon, a pioneer of plus size.
I'm very proud of her. I don't know her or anything like that, but I feel like I do because I can relate to her so strongly.
I still have the People's Magazine from whenever she was on the cover. That was a historic moment for me. I kept it and I've saved it all these years.
I had never felt so excited and so accepted.
This emotional connection to Tess on such a sensitive and personal topic means that these women are very receptive to things that Tess has to say. Which would be all fine and well if Tess limited the conversation to beauty standards and body positivity, but as we've seen, she just doesn't.
I always mention my success, but then it would always be followed with, well, she's unhealthy or this, so.
Right.
Which I'm not.
She's constantly reaffirming to everyone that she's healthy, and anyone who says otherwise is just fat phobic. So when these women come to Tess seeking inspiration and to feel more body positive, they're also receiving a dose of health at every size at the same time. Because of this, Tess Holliday, as the most famous body positive influencer, as well as other BOPO influencers, have become the gateway drug to health at every size. Where you go looking for one, you often find the other. Now, to really understand what I mean by this, it's important to take a look back at the origins of health at every size and how we got here.
Hi, I'm Dr. Linda Bacon, and I'm devoted to creating a global transformation that focuses on body respect, not the war on weight.
HAES has been around for many years, but became more popular following the 2008 publishing of a book of the same name by Dr. Linda Bacon, formerly Linda, who you were just introduced to. When I first started researching health at every size for this video, I was actually surprised at how reasonable some of the ideas were.
Health at every size is a movement that is basically just encouraging people to adopt good health behaviors and to forget about weight as a goal or weight change as a goal, and instead just embrace the bodies that we're living in and make good health choices to support them.
Doesn't sound so bad, right? I wholeheartedly agree that forgetting about the number on the scale and just focusing on the behaviors that lead to good health is not only the best way to get healthy, but ironically probably the best way to lose weight as well. And honestly, there are many other reasonable and important ideas in this book that I think could be helpful for people, such as the need to practice self-acceptance at any size, the need to end weight stigma in healthcare, and the fact that crash diets, even if they do lead to weight loss, are not healthy or sustainable. If this was all the movement was pushing, it would be a good thing. But, and it's a big but, unfortunately, these ideas are overshadowed with the need to push that fat or obesity is not unhealthy in any way, shape, or form. And what's particularly harmful about this is that it's done in a way that suggests that this is the truth according to science.
Okay, so we don't have evidence that fat is the killer it's made out to be, you may be thinking, but it clearly causes disease. Does it? Suspend your preconceptions and a very different picture emerges. One where it's the machinery of weight stigma that needs dismantling.
Some of these scientific truths, according to HAES, are: your body size is almost 100% genetically determined and not at all under your control. Weight loss is scientifically impossible, and quote, those who do succeed are statistical anomalies whose habits are akin to eating disordered behavior and extreme amounts of exercise. There are no health benefits to losing weight anyway. In fact, it might be harmful to your health. Excess body fat does not affect your health. And of course, diets don't work, with no nuance applied to suggest that a lifestyle change does work. Health at Every Size literally claims that obesity isn't unhealthy, and even if it was, weight loss is impossible. So we should all just stop trying.
The best way to win the war against fat is to give up the fight.
Before we continue, for anyone watching this thinking, no, you have Healthy Size all wrong. It is not about pushing that fat or obesity is not unhealthy. According to many websites and Health at Every Size practitioners, the issues that I've mentioned with HAES are misconceptions. They're ideas that have been distorted by the internet, and they're not reflective of the true benign nature of Health at Every Size. Even YouTube's own Abby Sharp is Health at Every Size, and she has a disclaimer on her website which says, "It's health at every size, not healthy at every size, a subtle but important distinction." But the more I looked, the more I saw that that was not true at all. In fact, on the official Health at Every Size website, there is blatant obesity denial. In the FAQ section, there's a question that says, shouldn't we be looking for a cure for obesity rather than promoting size acceptance? And their official answer not only included obese and question marks as if it were fictional, but also stated, in order to cure a condition, the condition must be defined as a disease. If we say obesity is a disease, then we must say on some level that body fat is pathological. But there is no evidence that adipose tissue is harmful to our health. Yeah, so it was then that I realized that not only were Health at Every Size and fat acceptance similar, but they were the exact same thing. If you don't believe me, then keep watching. HealthAtEverySizeblog.org chronicles the roots of HAES, tracing the foundational ideas all the way back to the 60s and 70s, where a political group called the Fat Underground band together to try to infiltrate the medical establishment in an attempt to change anti-fat attitudes that, quote, perpetuated the unhealthy habits encouraged by diet culture. Sound familiar?
99% of the people who lose weight gain it back. 90% of those people gain back more than they lost.
People, women like ourselves who are forced to diet our entire lives because we're naturally fat women and who are talking about 100-pound weight loss that is killing us.
It's because it's your body's nature to be fat, and that's the reason. You know you'll have no life at all until you accept yourself as the woman you are.
Their motto was literally, doctors are the enemy, weight loss is genocide. And the change society, not ourselves ideology was apparently the foundation of their movement. And no, that's not satire, that's really what it says. If you were to go and look up the history of the fat acceptance movement as a political group, you would actually find the exact same story as what's posted here for Health at Every Size. The history of Health at Every Size and the history of fat acceptance are the exact same. They're the same group. Most of, if not all, the foundational ideas of Health at Every Size as they exist today can be found back then in various fat acceptance texts. Let's see if we recognize any of these ideas. Biology, not eating habits, is the main cause of fat. Health problems of fat people are not inherently due to fat, but the result of stress, self-hatred, and chronic dieting. Weight loss efforts damage health, almost never succeed except temporarily, and should not be used. And actually, here's a quote from a book titled Don't Diet that they listed on their website as one of their texts, which pretty much echoes the sentiment we saw earlier. There is no good reason to consider the general increase in fatness an epidemic. People are becoming taller too, but nobody talks about a height epidemic. Nor is there any good reason to consider fatness a disease. The people of the Western world are both fatter and healthier than ever before. And the experts and co-founders of Healthy at Every Size, as listed by ASDA's website, are all members of NAFA, the National Association to Advance Fat Acceptance. Clearly, even after all these years, Health at Every Size has not come very far from its roots in fat activism. Now, as a quick disclaimer, Health at Every Size has become a huge movement today, and I am not by any means saying that all Health at Every Size practitioners are fat activists. I'm sure there are lots of HAES professionals that practice it a lot more responsibly than what's being depicted here, and are not even aware that this is a Trojan horse for fat activism. Now, obviously, it's my opinion that it's a Trojan horse, but if the shoe fits. So sure, you might say that everything I've listed is a misconception, but I would argue that it's a misconception that these are misconceptions, and it's a ploy to seem more reasonable than it is in order to advance the goals of the movement. And at its core, Health at Every Size's main goal is to push fat activism and not health. And of course, conveniently, the more radical ideas of health at every size are what spread like wildfire across social media by body positive influencers like Tess, while the more reasonable ideas take a back seat or are stripped of nuance to the point of uselessness. You do not need to downplay the very real risks of obesity to champion the idea that everyone can take steps to live a healthier lifestyle regardless of their body size. And the fact that they do shows their true intent, in my opinion. The impact of Health at Every Size messages being disseminated by Tess Holliday and similar is that some of her followers have been pulled into the rhetoric of Health at Every Size and now truly believe that it's possible to be morbidly obese and healthy.
After I discovered Tess, it led me to discover a lot of other fat positive, fat acceptance influencers. So one of the big points that I remember was always subscribing to the idea that I was fat, but I was healthy. My blood work was fine, everything was fine, so I'm fine. I was really excited to finally feel accepted and to finally feel like my body was good and it was beautiful. My body was good and it was just unhealthy. And I didn't want to see that, and entering into the fat acceptance movement really made me blind to that.
And the fact that Tess and other obese people receive so much hate online, telling them otherwise, pushes these women further into their online groups and deeper into the lies of Health at Every Size.
Fat people have to live in a world that openly hates them. They talk about solving the obesity epidemic. That means getting rid of people like me.
After all, if you're obese, you're living in an obese body, you truly believe that obese people are just as healthy, that they were born this way, and that they can't change it at all, and the world refuses to acknowledge this and even shames you and pressures you to do something that's impossible, well then it can kind of feel like the whole world is against you. And speaking from experience, fat people do get bullied and they are ostracized in many ways for their weight. So this, coupled with the Health at Every Size and fat activists whispering in your ear that everybody hates fat people, can really make you feel like you need to attach yourself to your group. We are wired to define ourselves by those who consider in and out of our groups, something called in-group favoritism. For certain sects of the body positivity and fat acceptance movements, anyone who is happily obese is welcome in the group. However, anyone losing weight or propagating #diet culture is a threat to the group and therefore unwelcome.
Participating in a diet that says you must lose weight to be more worthy is not body positive. Being forced to lose weight for medical reasons is not body positive. I am asking you to think critically about how your participation in diet culture may be harmful to other people.
Meaning that if members want to remain in their group where they've made friends, where they feel more accepted and beautiful than they do in regular society, then they are under pressure to remain fat. Tess herself is very careful to make sure that although everyone knows she's living that healthy lifestyle, she is absolutely under no circumstances trying to lose weight. In her interview for the Self magazine cover that we talked about, she talks about starting to eat healthier, but feeling guilty about it. Tess worries that her fans and followers might take the shift the wrong way, and is quick to clarify, "I'm still gonna eat Cheetos and all of that." She understands that a brand built on self-acceptance might question changes in her lifestyle if they come across as abandoning this core philosophy. Wow, sounds like a really loving and accepting group of people, ready to lynch you at a moment's notice if you so much as stop eating Cheetos. Clearly, Tess is aware that she now needs to stay obese in order to retain the love and respect of her fans. And if she ever happened to lose weight or needed to lose weight for medical reasons, she'd be in a tough situation. She'd be attacked, and she would definitely be dethroned as their queen of body positivity. Because no one in this group will admit that obesity is unhealthy, all intentional weight loss is considered fat phobia, even in the face of serious and life-threatening medical concerns, resulting in a toxic culture where people have to choose between their friends and their online community and their health.
Making choices to become healthier were my choices. And I made those choices very aware of what would come as a result of them.
I'd had this health scare. My doctor came and saw me and he revealed that I had type 2 diabetes, which I had never received that diagnosis before. And he was basically like, look, you have to lose some amount of weight in order to deal with this, or you're gonna have to be just permanently on medication for diabetes, probably for the rest of your life.
I held myself back from losing weight because I thought I was making like this political statement, right? And I was being such a rebel, and that I was part of this fat acceptance movement and no body shaming and loving and accepting myself. But
I wanted to belong to some sort of community, and
what I found was that I was being pushed out of these spaces where body positivity activism was happening. People that I really admired, other writers, body positive writers, fat positive writers, I was being asked to leave these spaces because I first of all felt that there were some scenarios where it was acceptable to want to lose weight.
And what has happened is any plus size person who's ever lost weight in this space has been viciously attacked by this community.
I thought that they were all about accepting yourself, loving yourself, loving your body, no body shaming, all of these very good things.
So body positivity and the fat acceptance movement was supposed to be all inclusive, they're supposed to be like these loving people, but I'm being kicked out of it.
The more I was in it, the more I saw how judgmental they were. If you did decide to start losing weight and wanted to become healthy, they just like cast you out and they didn't want to have like anything else to do with you. And to be honest, I never really felt like I truly was accepted in that community.
I always felt like I was faking, like I was being someone I didn't like in order to get a group of people who didn't want to see me succeed to like me.
So why is it that health at every size and body positivity activists feel confident in smugly claiming that they know better?
I've got science on my side and I'm happy to stand with it.
Unfortunately, a lot of it has to do with the author of the book, Lindo Bacon. If you still had any hope that Hayes is more rational than it seems at the outset, that hope will probably die during this section of the video. Lindo Bacon has a PhD, is apparently a scientist, has worked in research, but their ideas aren't exactly unbiased or rigorously tested. The crux of Lindo's argument in their own words? Repeat after me. My weight is not the problem. Society's problem about weight is the problem. Lindo lists 8 myths surrounding obesity in the book, beginning with what is called the death by fat myth.
We hear in the news all the time about an obesity epidemic and how people are dying of obesity. And what we see is that it's just not true. It's just not true. It's just not true. It's just not true.
What is officially the biggest health crisis in American history.
More than 200,000 doctors have backed a report tonight calling for urgent action to combat obesity.
Nutritionists say obesity is the biggest threat to public health. In the last 30 years, obesity rates for kids have tripled.
It can lead to a number of health conditions such as high blood pressure, liver disease, and even cancer.
1 in 3 American pets are now obese. Think about that.
Yes, unfortunately, you have heard right. Lindo Bacon outright denies that people are dying of obesity, despite the mountain of evidence, scientific and anecdotal, suggesting otherwise.
What most studies show is that people considered overweight and mildly or moderately obese live at least as long as, or longer, than people deemed normal weight. The data are a little more complicated at the extremes of underweight or obesity, so I won't get into that here.
So what Lindo is referring to here is what's called the obesity paradox. The discovery that in some studies, overweight and mildly obese people were found to have lived as long as normal weight individuals. And in some instances, overweight people were actually found to have lived longer. The most famous example of this is a meta-analysis from 2013, which tracked 2.8 million people, done by Catherine Flegel. Lindo decides that this one data point is satisfactory enough evidence to say this. The science is clear, body fat is not the killer it's made out to be. But is that a true statement? Is the science clear?
Does fat kill? Let's look at the facts.
First off, plenty of other studies have found the exact opposite, that people in the normal weight category fare best, and for every deviation beyond that, you're shaving years off your life. Second, the prevailing opinion is that the obesity paradox can be explained away by various biases in the research. And the reason it's a paradox is because researchers are confused at why it would even be there, and they're scrambling to try and explain it because obesity has a long history of being correlated with so many different types of disease. This has actually happened before with something called the smoker's paradox, where it was found that in some studies, for some strange reason, smoking seemed to impart some sort of survival advantage. It was shown to lower risk of death after certain types of heart attacks, as well as decrease your risk of Parkinson's and knee replacement surgery. In both instances, doctors and researchers were really trying to explain the results as quickly as they could because they knew that if this kind of information made its way into the media and got distorted to suggest that, okay, this means that smoking is healthy or obesity is healthy, that it would be detrimental to public health. Dr. Sadia Khan, a cardiologist at Northwestern University, noticed this effect in his practice. The obesity paradox caused a lot of confusion and potential damage because we know there are cardiovascular and non-cardiovascular risks associated with obesity. I get a lot of patients who ask, why do I need to lose weight if research says I'm going to live longer? I tell them that losing weight doesn't just reduce the risk of developing heart disease, but also other diseases like cancer. Our data shows you'll live longer and healthier at a normal weight. Given this confusion, it's safe to say that it's not appropriate and even dangerous to suggest that obesity doesn't kill people. The fact that the obesity paradox exists isn't sufficient to say that obesity isn't healthy, just like the smoker's paradox isn't sufficient to say that smoking is healthy. In reality, life expectancy is one data point among a sea of data points. And we can't use it to say, hey, that means being obese is healthy then. And truthfully, you can't use it to say the opposite, that it means that obesity is unhealthy. It is one piece of a bigger picture. A bigger picture that still suggests that being obese is terrible for you. Now, despite the fact that, as I've said, there's a lot to this. There's a lot to the discussion of the obesity paradox. In Lindo's book, this section is only about 2 paragraphs long when we remove the little nod to NAFA and fat acceptance, meaning that Lindo wanted to leave it as if it was self-evident that this meant that obesity didn't reduce life expectancy. No mention of the biases, nothing like that.
Okay, so we don't have evidence that fat is the killer it's made out to be, you may be thinking, but it clearly causes disease. Does it? Does it?
Okay, so before we unpack this point, we need to stop and talk about the wording.
So we don't have evidence that fat is the killer it's made out to be, you may be thinking.
We do have evidence that fat kills people. We have years of evidence. We have mountains of evidence. You absolutely cannot say that we don't have evidence. You can maybe say it's not conclusive, but you can under no circumstances say we don't have evidence. Not when the prevailing medical opinion is that obesity kills people.
Obesity on its own contributes to hundreds of thousands of premature deaths in the United States every year, and if we factor in its contributions to all of the major chronic diseases, the number is staggering.
It's one thing to support a controversial hypothesis, to believe it to be true, and to present it properly. That is totally fine. It's quite another thing to present your opinion as known fact, as if any sane person looking at the research would come to the same conclusion that you are. If you're going to put forth a controversial opinion, you need to prove it. You can't just act like it's self-evident because you're a researcher. This is a pattern for Lindo. I originally wanted this section to be breaking down how the obesity paradox is wrong and blah, 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 but there's literally not enough time given how glib and problematic everything that comes out of Lindo Bacon's mouth is. And I think it's important that we do spend some time on this because it's being done intentionally to manipulate and deceive the audience. And in my opinion, it's outright negligent to present yourself as some scientific authority and then present your opinions as known facts. And now Lindo is taking it one step further and suggesting not only does obesity not result in premature death, but that it also doesn't cause disease. If you convince a group of people that obesity is not harmful and you're wrong, you're literally hurting people. Anyway, back to Lindo's main point.
But it clearly causes disease. Does it?
In the book, Lindo expounds on this further by saying, "The idea that weight plays a large causal role in disease is also unproven. Little evidence supports that weight is the primary cause of many diseases for which it is routinely blamed, except osteoarthritis, sleep apnea, and a few cancers." Yeah, if you don't mind a few cancers, losing your mobility, and never being able to get a restful night's sleep again without a CPAP machine, then obesity is no big deal.
Where you have higher levels of obesity, you have higher levels of diabetes, you have higher levels of hypertension, you have higher levels of coronary artery disease, you have higher levels of cancer, you have higher levels of dementia, you have higher levels of degenerative arthritis, and on it goes.
Does it?
Now, before we get into this next section, we have to break down the deceptive wording again. I already showed you the 200 diseases that obesity ups your risk of getting. It's impossible to argue that obesity doesn't result in disease. But Lindo intentionally said primary cause here, because cause is technically impossible to prove with epidemiological studies, which is the type of study used to track diseases and all that kind of thing in a population. So yeah, Lindo is right, it's not proven to be the primary cause, but that's more of a fact of epidemiology than it is suggestive of anything about obesity. And as a scientist, Lindo is well aware of this. So Lindo is intentionally speaking in a way so as to confuse the average person reading this into thinking, oh, well that means that obesity doesn't result in disease. And if you think about it, if Lindo stated what they meant in more plain terms, it would be a really pointless thing to argue. Yeah, of course, we can't prove that with epidemiological studies. What's your point? The point is, this whole section is meant to deceive people into thinking that obesity is not bad for you.
Obesity is a leading predictor of health outcomes in the modern age. Period. Full stop. It's just a fact. It's a fact of epidemiology.
Anyway, back to the idea that's being presented here. This idea is an offshoot of what's called the metabolically healthy obese, which is the idea that people who are obese but their blood markers show no signs of insulin resistance or prediabetes or hypertension are healthy individuals despite being technically obese. This is true. There are plenty of obese people whose metabolic health suggests that they are healthy right now, at this moment in time. If the definition of health we're using here is that health is the absence of disease anyway. But unfortunately, when we look at this group and how they fare long term, it's often found that the metabolically healthy obese at some point become metabolically unhealthy. And among those who do manage to remain metabolically healthy, one study found that compared with normal weight people with no metabolic abnormalities, people who were metabolically healthy obese had a 50% increased risk of coronary heart disease, a 7% increased risk of stroke, and a double risk of heart failure. While another study stated, obese persons are at increased risk for adverse long-term outcomes even in the absence of metabolic abnormalities, suggesting that there is no healthy pattern of increased weight. I just plucked a couple of quotes there, but I reviewed many papers to come to this conclusion. In an interview with Dr. Arya Sharma, founder and scientific director of Obesity Canada, he agreed that someone who is obese can still be metabolically healthy, even if they're outside the normal weight range. But Sharma cautions that sooner or later, in most obese people, their weight will become a health problem. It really is no different than smoking. Not every smoker will suffer a smoking-related disease, but enough of them will that we need to warn people that this is dangerous. Just because you're not suffering from health problems right now does not mean that you're not at an increased risk than if you were smaller. And I think it's this flawed, metabolically healthy obese idea that has led to this wave of you can't tell a person's health by their appearance more than anything else.
Everyone is all of a sudden a doctor and they think that they can look at your photos and determine your worth and your happiness and your perceived health.
In many instances, this is true. Just because someone is of normal weight does not mean that they live a healthy lifestyle or that they have a clean bill of health. But if someone weighs 300 plus pounds like Tess Holliday and has no plans of even acknowledging that it's a problem, then it is fair to say that your weight may indeed disqualify you from being considered healthy. And you can most definitely infer just from looking at them that at their current state, they are at an increased risk of disease. Now, does that mean you should say that kind of thing to people? No, of course not. That's really, really rude.
But anyone suggesting that there is some alternate universe where being 300+ pounds at 5'5" is healthy is hurting people, whether that's the intention or not. Just because your health markers are not demonstrating in this exact moment that you are not unhealthy does not mean that they will not in the future. It's like fat activists just forget that we all get old. I don't know. We are now entering the part of the video where I openly attack Lindo Bacon's character. As I mentioned earlier, it seemed to me that Lindo Bacon's presentation style was pretty frivolous and oddly unscientific for someone who's making such serious waves online. So who is Lindo Bacon exactly? In November 2014, an article appeared in the Chicago Tribune titled, "Can You Be Overweight and Healthy?" Now, in this article, Lindo puts forth various ideas and the other doctors pretty much just take turns shutting her down. But the real tea happened afterwards. James Fell, the journalist who wrote the article for the Chicago Tribune, wrote an article on his website telling a little bit more of the backstory to the quote, challenging interview that he had with Lindo. And as a result of this, Lindo Bacon actually complained about this article to the Chicago Tribune until they issued a correction, and then promptly tweeted, "No, I don't endorse much attributed to me in Chicago Trib. Let's call for responsible journalism." James Fell then sent a reply reminding Lindo that I had a voice recording of our conversation and that the quotes were accurate and in context. Upon finding out that he had receipts and that Lindo could be exposed, they wrote 2 apology emails immediately. So the reason I felt it appropriate to include this story is that it's quite suggestive of the type of person that Lindo Bacon is. And in particular, it demonstrates that Lindo has a history of making a claim and then retracting it when it doesn't paint them in the best light. The technique Lindo likes to employ, in my opinion of course, is called doublespeak. And actually the YouTube channel What I've Learned did an entire video on it.
Doublespeak is language designed to evade responsibility, make the unpleasant appear pleasant, the unattractive appear attractive. Basically, it's language designed to mislead while pretending not to.
Lindo is constantly making these statements that could be construed as having double meanings. The statement, "Little evidence supports that weight is the primary cause of many diseases for which it is routinely blamed," is intended to mean you can't conclusively prove causality with epidemiological studies, and also excess fat does not cause disease. Just like the statement, "The science is clear, body fat is not the killer it's made out to be," means the link between mortality and obesity isn't as clear-cut as the media portrays it to be. And also, excess body fat doesn't kill people. By speaking in this way, Lindo can simultaneously convince someone who doesn't know how epidemiological studies work that obesity is not dangerous, but also save their ass in case someone that does takes a look at this and says, well, why would you say that? Especially when the link between obesity and disease is so well documented that there's not a lot of room to argue that.
Period, full stop. It's just a fact. It's a fact of epidemiology.
Lindo's actions demonstrate to me that health is not the primary goal of health at every size. If this were true, there'd be no need to hide behind vague language and cherry-picked data. You would fully explain your points. If only out of passion for the fact that you believed that this is true and that fat people were being, unfairly vilified for something that is not unhealthy. And this certainly helps to explain why Lindo's mission statement does not mention health at all. Lindo is fostering a more just world, not a healthy one. Why? Because health at every size is not a health movement, it is entirely political. Tess Holliday wants you to believe, and probably wants to believe herself, that she's healthy. Lindo Bacon and Health at Every Size want you to believe that obesity is healthy. And Cosmo and every other woke corporate entity don't care what you believe as long as you buy their stuff. They all have very different reasons for doing what they do, but the result is the same. People are truly beginning to believe that obesity is not very dangerous, despite the pile of evidence suggesting otherwise, and the very flimsy evidence to suggest the opposite. These women find Tess and they feel validated because she looks beautiful, even at 300 pounds. Then Health at Every Size chimes in and tells them that, well, not only can you be beautiful, but you can be healthy at that weight. Being morbidly obese doesn't mean you're unhealthy. or have a problem with food. You're just built that way, and it's only diet culture and fat phobia telling you otherwise. And this is a very seductive alternative after spending a lifetime trying and failing to lose weight and not feeling like your body is beautiful or worthy or anything like that. And you can see why otherwise rational people can get pulled into this alternate reality where they're being lied to by Health at Every Size and Tess Holliday. Oh my god, that was a long one. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. It was quite the undertaking, more than I thought it would be. I actually researched obesity for like 2 weeks before starting this video, and then I literally didn't use like any of that research in this video, so at least I'm confident that obesity is bad for you now. Anyway, I hope to have another video out for you guys in less than like 5 weeks. So I will see you in the next one. And if you are watching this far and you are not subscribed, yeah, hit the subscribe button and like, and yeah. Thank you for watching. See you in the next one.
Researchers imply that being fat is a cause of certain things, but that's not what their studies show. A big mistake that is made is not differentiating between factors that are correlative and those that are causative.